October 10th, 2022. Yeah, the forecast is a little bit late, but after that weekend, I thought, well, let's wait and see if we do have a nuclear war, which is apparently something that is on the table again. Very Plutonian, right? Pluto station on Saturday. And what did we hear about? I think it was Thursday, that we're closer to nuclear war than we've been in 60 years. We also had a bit of our own mini financial crisis. It's not quite as dramatic as when Pluto stationed direct for the first time in Capricorn in 2008, but now that he's stationing direct for the last time in 2022, we are getting some rumbles. And if that's not atypical, we have perhaps a more sustained and less dramatic kind of event when a planet leaves a sign than when he enters or she enters. So that is part of the situation. We also had some stuff this weekend going on. There were a lot of things going on with the Ukraine war. We have this good news and bad news scenario, right? I mean, Ukraine is doing well against Russia, which is good news, but that provokes Russia, so it's bad news. And we had the economic data was relative good news, but it wasn't good enough, so it was bad news. And of course, bad news is still bad news. On the other hand, we had the Jets, the Giants, and the Bills all won yesterday, and that's good news. And the Mets lost, and that's bad news. So you see, it's all relative. This week we get a bit of a break, and this very goth, very intense October is going to slow down just a smidge over the course of this week, and then the end of the month is just one big Halloween all the time. It's a very Plutonian, very dark, very Scorpionic kind of month. If you're a Scorpio, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying, it's a very intense kind of time. And I want to point out, I want to announce that next weekend, next Saturday at 11 Eastern, I'm going to be doing the forecast live. It's kind of an experiment to see about doing live videos. So if you can make it onto the channel next Saturday at 11, then you can ask questions and we can have a discussion in addition to the forecast. And if not, don't worry about it. I probably wouldn't make it either. Don't like you'd be worried about it. Anyway, that forecast or some reasonable facsimile of it will be up on Sunday at the usual time. But by all means, if you're around on Saturday, come join. It's a sort of a test to see about doing live YouTube stuff. All right, what's going on this week? We have some productivity. We have some possibility. We have a little bit of an ease in the intensity. A couple of things that are going to help, and one thing that's going to kind of not be so helpful. We have both Saturn, we have both the Sun and Venus trine Saturn. Most of this stuff is going down the early part of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. The Sun trine Saturn helps to put things on a little bit more of an even keel or have a little bit deeper keel to keep the ship righted. The same thing with Venus, which could be quite helpful in terms of stabilizing markets and stuff. Venus and Saturn are going to do their thing on Wednesday, which is when we should get the next big piece of data that will affect the economy. And Venus is very much associated with the economy, particularly in her current position. But let's not get too far out there. Also has a little to do with some of the war situation that is going on as well. But we do have one little hiccup this week, and that is Mars is square to Neptune. Now, Mars, of course, very intense, slowing down, gonna retrograde soon. And so we're getting a lot of power from Mars. As he approaches Neptune on the square, we have these two planets in these sort of slippery signs, right? Mars in Gemini is going to handle a lot of things verbally, but can really produce a lot of stuff. And of course, Neptune in Pisces is it's not a grounded, realistic planet. So although Saturn is trying to hold the keel, trying to keep us a little bit straight with these aspects to the Sun and Venus, here comes Mars and Neptune. And, although Mars and Neptune in the signs that they're in may have a lot to do with verbal things, I wouldn't limit Mars to verbalization at any point in time. I'd be very careful driving this week. I'd be very careful driving anytime, but I'd be very careful driving this week, especially up through about Thursday. I think we can see some real issues there, but it's not just that type of stuff. We're gonna see some folks going off on crusades. That's what happens when you have Mars and Neptune in tough aspect to each other. As I said, hopefully they'll be mostly verbal crusades, but that's the type of thing that we see. We see folks getting a little bit too riled up, folks pushing themselves out a little bit too far. That's a very Mars Neptune kind of situation. The other thing that's happening this week is that Mercury is opposite Jupiter. This is the third time that Mercury is opposite Jupiter because of his retrograde. The first one was back on September 2nd, and then the next one was back about, I'm going to do this. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. I should have this on the top of my head, but I don't. September 18th. And now we have it this week on Tuesday. What I would say about this, this week, it doesn't really matter what day. What I would say about this is that stuff that began in September that was, and has sort of wavered back and forth, kind of has an opportunity for some resolution now. Things that had to be delayed because of Mercury retrograde, signing on the dotted line, having an interview, negotiations on anything that have been just sort of up in the air. Maybe now we can finally get a little resolution to them. The delays that were caused by Mercury retrograde are resolved this week. Of course, it pushes us into the shadow of Mars retrograde, deep into the shadow of Mars retrograde. And so we're liable to still be slowed down in other respects. So there we have it. We have a bit of stabilizing energy, and we have some rather unstable aspects. The Mars-Neptune is the real concern this week. Feel it certainly Monday, Tuesday. Let's just say the first 3 days of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Hopefully, Saturn is helping to slow down any rash actions. Let's hope. And then we have Mercury opposite Jupiter. It's probably the resolution of something that began about 6 weeks ago, early September, think right around Labor Day type of thing if you're in the US. That's a positive. The challenging side of Mercury Jupiter is that folks can say too much, maybe as I'm doing now. So that's something you'd want to be careful. Mostly it's not like you slip out information by accident. It's usually with a Mercury Jupiter type of thing. You sort of go off on a rant and say too much and just throw it all out there, as it were, rather than having a little bit of restraint and a little bit of caution. That is what is happening this week. Mercury is jumping into Libra in order to oppose Jupiter. So that's something that has been, again, pulling us away from that retrograde and getting us moving again. We have at the weekend, we have the last quarter moon in Cancer. It is a time of assessing things. It is very, very likely to have a lot of folks, particularly on the collective level, but in general, people pulling in. We're very likely to have people pulling in and being a little bit more cautious. It's a little bit more of that sort of, circle the wagons kind of energy. It's it's a point of assessment and decisions, but there's a lot of caution that goes with that. So it may not be, the most raucous weekend, but you can do what you can. And then we have the end of the month. So I hope if you're around, you can come by on Saturday at 11 Eastern time, and we can talk about these things. And you can say, oh, no, but what do you mean by that? If not, as I said, there'll be some kind of forecast up by Sunday, and I'll see you then.